There comes a moment in certain connections when the illusion begins to fall away, when what once felt uncertain starts to solidify into something undeniable, something that no longer depends on imagination or projection, but begins to stand on its own weight. What is forming between you is not sluch-eye or fleeting emotion. It is the quiet construction of something deeper, something that has been unfolding beneath the surface long before you became aware of it, like roots growing in darkness before breaking into the light. At first you may have questioned it, doubted its authenticity, tried to rationalize it or even escape it, because what is real often feels unfamiliar, and what is unfamiliar can feel unsettling. But notice how this connection does not fade with distance, how it does not weaken with time, how it continues to return to your awareness with a quiet persistence, as if something within you recognizes its importance before your mind can fully understand it. This is not merely attraction, not merely comfort. It is a meeting of inner worlds where both individuals begin to see themselves more clearly through the presence of the other. And this is where the challenge begins. Because something real does not only reveal what is easy to love, it reveals what has been hidden, the parts of you that were buried, ignored, or denied, bringing them to the surface not to destroy you, but to transform you. You may feel moments of tension, confusion, even resistance, because growth rarely arrives in the form we expect. It disrupts, it questions, it forces you to confront what you would rather avoid. Yet this is precisely how something meaningful is built. Not through perfection, but through awareness. Not through control, but through surrender. Not through illusion, but through truth. What is taking shape between you is not fragile. It is being tested, refined, strengthened through every moment of uncertainty, every silence, every unspoken understanding. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to anchor itself in reality. You begin to feel it in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way your inner world starts to reorganize itself around a deeper sense of meaning. This is how something real emerges. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand attention. It simply becomes impossible to ignore. And the more you resist it, the stronger its presence becomes, not because it seeks to control you, but because it is aligned with something within you that is ready to evolve. So do not mistake the intensity for instability. Do not mistake the challenge for incompatibility. What you are experiencing is a process of something rare coming into form, something that asks more from you, something that reveals more to you, something that has the potential to change you. And the question is not whether it is real. The question is whether you are ready to accept what it requires of you. Because once something real begins to take shape, it does not return to what it once was. It either grows into something profound, or it dissolves under the weight of fear. And the choice whether to step into it or retreat from it will determine not only the fate of the connection, but the direction of your own becoming. There are moments in life when a connection begins to shift from uncertainty into something that feels grounded, something that no longer depends on imagination, but starts to exist with a quiet, undeniable presence. What once felt fragile or undefined begins to carry weight, as if it is slowly rooting itself into reality without asking for permission. This kind of transformation does not happen suddenly, nor does it arrive with clarity at first. It emerges through small realizations, through repeated emotional echoes, through the subtle recognition that what you are experiencing is not fading, like ordinary encounters tend to do. Instead, it deepens, becoming more complex, more layered, more real with time. At the beginning, there is often confusion, a tendency to question whether what you feel is genuine or simply a projection of desire. The mind tries to analyze, to categorize, to protect itself from uncertainty. Yet something within continues to pull your awareness back, not with force, but with persistence, as if it carries a truth that cannot be easily dismissed. What is taking shape between you is not built on surface-level attraction. It moves beneath appearances, touching parts of you that are rarely reached by ordinary interactions. It brings forward emotions you did not expect, thoughts you cannot easily silence, and a sense of recognition that feels both familiar and unsettling at the same time. This is where the depth reveals itself, not through comfort, but through the way it challenges you to confront your inner world. The connection begins to mirror aspects of yourself you may have ignored, highlighting both your strengths and your unresolved shadows. It asks you to see clearly not only the other person, but yourself in a way that is honest and unfiltered. As this process unfolds, resistance may arise. There is a natural instinct to retreat from what feels intense or unknown, to return to what is simple and predictable. But something real does not allow itself to be reduced to convenience. It demands presence, awareness, and a willingness to move beyond old patterns. Over time, the uncertainty begins to lose its grip. What replaces it is not certainty in the traditional sense, but a deeper knowing, a quiet understanding that what is forming carries significance. It no longer feels like something that can be easily replaced or forgotten. And in this unfolding, you begin to realize that what is developing is not just a connection between two people, but a transformation within yourself. A shift that continues to evolve as long as you allow it to exist without fear. There is a subtle yet profound shift that occurs when a connection begins to move beyond illusion and into something grounded in truth. A shift that cannot always be explained in words, but can be felt in the depth of your awareness. What once seemed uncertain, shaped by hope or projection, starts to take on a form that feels stable, almost undeniable in its presence. In the beginning, illusion often disguises itself as possibility. You imagine, you interpret, you fill in the gaps with meaning that may or may not exist. It creates a sense of excitement, but also a quiet instability, because what is built on illusion cannot fully sustain itself. It depends on perception rather than reality, on what you wish to see rather than what is truly there. Yet something begins to change when truth starts to emerge. It does not arrive loudly or dramatically, but rather through consistency, through repeated experiences that align with what is felt internally. The connection begins to show itself in ways that no longer rely on assumption. Actions, presence, and emotional depth start to reflect something real, something that holds its shape even when questioned. This is the moment where clarity replaces confusion, not because all answers are suddenly revealed, but because the need to constantly question begins to fade. You no longer feel the urge to convince yourself of its authenticity, because it demonstrates itself naturally, without effort or force. Truth carries a different kind of energy. It does not fluctuate based on mood or circumstance. It remains steady even when external conditions shift. This steadiness is what distinguishes it from illusion, which often collapses under pressure or disappears when not constantly reinforced. As a connection crystallizes, it begins to reveal deeper layers, not only of the bond itself, but of your own inner world. You start to see more clearly how you respond, what you fear, what you value. The connection becomes a mirror, reflecting both your clarity and your confusion, but doing so in a way that invites understanding rather than avoidance. There may still be moments of doubt, moments where old patterns attempt to reassert themselves, but these moments no longer define the connection. They pass through it rather than shaping it, because what is real has already begun to anchor itself beyond temporary uncertainty. And in this anchoring, there is a quiet recognition that something has changed. What once required imagination now exists in reality, carrying a presence that does not need to be constantly proven. It simply is, and that is what gives it its strength. At first, many connections begin at the surface, guided by appearance, curiosity, or the immediate pull of attraction. There is a spark, a sense of excitement, a fascination with what is visible and easily understood. Yet this stage, while compelling, often lacks substance, because it is shaped more by perception than by true understanding. Over time, something begins to shift when the connection is not allowed to remain on that surface. Emotional depth starts to emerge not as a sudden transformation, but as a gradual unfolding of what lies beneath. Conversations move beyond the predictable, silences become more meaningful, and presence begins to carry a weight that words alone cannot explain. This is the point where attraction is no longer driven by what is seen, but by what is felt. The focus shifts from external qualities to internal realities, from how someone appears to how they exist within their own emotional world. You begin to notice not just their expressions, but their contradictions, their vulnerabilities, their unspoken struggles. Superficial attraction often seeks validation and immediate satisfaction. It thrives on attention, on being noticed, on maintaining a certain image. Emotional depth, however, does not depend on constant reassurance. It grows through authenticity, through moments of honesty that may not always be comfortable, but carry a sense of truth that cannot be ignored. As this depth develops, the connection begins to reveal layers that are not always easy to face. You are no longer engaging with a simplified version of the other person, but with their complexity. This includes their fears, their past, their uncertainties, all of which require a different kind of presence, one that is patient, aware, and willing to remain, even when things are not perfect. In this space, attraction transforms into something more stable. It is no longer dependent on excitement alone, but is supported by understanding and emotional resonance. You begin to feel connected not just to who the person appears to be, but to who they are in moments of doubt, in moments of silence, in moments where there is nothing to impress or prove. There is also a shift within yourself. Emotional depth asks you to move beyond your own surface, to confront your own patterns, your own expectations, and your own capacity for connection. It becomes less about being desired and more about being understood, less about maintaining an image, and more about revealing what is real. This transformation does not eliminate attraction, but reshapes it into something more enduring, something that does not fade when novelty disappears, something that continues to grow as understanding deepens. And in that depth, the connection begins to carry a meaning that surface attraction alone could never sustain. There are connections that do more than bring two people together. They initiate a movement within, a subtle yet undeniable shift that begins to reshape the inner landscape. What starts as an external bond gradually becomes an internal process, one that reaches into places you may not have consciously explored before. At first, it may seem like the other person is the source of what you feel, as if their presence alone is responsible for the intensity or depth of the experience. But over time, it becomes clear that what is being activated lies within you, waiting for the right moment, the right encounter to come into awareness. This is how transformation begins, not as a deliberate effort, but as a response to something that challenges your usual way of being. The connection introduces new perspectives, unfamiliar emotions, and situations that disrupt your patterns. It does not allow you to remain in the same psychological position because it continuously brings your attention to what needs to be seen. You may notice changes in the way you think, in the way you react, in the way you understand yourself. Old beliefs begin to feel incomplete. Old defenses start to lose their effectiveness. What once felt like certainty becomes open to question, and what was once avoided begins to demand recognition. This process is not always comfortable. Inner transformation rarely is. It can feel disorienting, even overwhelming at times, because it involves letting go of parts of yourself that were once familiar. The connection acts as a mirror, reflecting not only your strengths, but also your fears, your insecurities, your unresolved experiences. Yet this reflection is not meant to weaken you. It is meant to bring clarity. By confronting what has been hidden, you gain the opportunity to integrate it, to understand it, to move beyond it. The bond becomes a catalyst, not because it forces change, but because it makes change unavoidable. There may be moments where you resist, where you wish to return to a state of simplicity, where you question whether the intensity is worth it. But even in resistance, something continues to shift beneath the surface, something that cannot be undone once it has begun. Gradually, you start to recognize that the connection is not only about closeness with another person, but about alignment within yourself. It guides you toward a deeper awareness, a more honest relationship with your own inner world. And as this awareness grows, you begin to see that what is unfolding is not just a bond between two individuals, but a process of becoming, one that continues to evolve as long as you remain open to what it reveals. There are connections that feel comforting because they reflect only what is easy to accept. But there are others that reach far deeper, revealing not just what is visible and admired, but also what has been hidden or avoided. In such a relationship, you are not simply seen for your strengths or your appealing qualities. You are encountered in your entirety, both the light you willingly show and the shadow you often keep concealed. At first, the light is what draws you in. It is the shared understanding, the moments of harmony, the recognition of qualities that feel aligned and reassuring. You see parts of yourself reflected back with clarity, and it creates a sense of connection that feels natural and affirming. This reflection of light builds trust, allowing the bond to deepen beyond superficial interaction. Yet as the connection grows, it does not remain confined to what is comfortable. The shadow begins to appear, not as something separate, but as an inseparable part of the same reflection. You start to notice reactions that seem unfamiliar, emotions that feel disproportionate, patterns that you may not have been aware of before. The other person, without intending to, becomes a mirror for these hidden aspects. This can be unsettling, because the shadow is not something the mind easily accepts. It carries the parts of yourself that were suppressed, denied, or never fully understood. In the presence of a meaningful connection, these aspects are brought into awareness, not to create distance, but to invite recognition. There may be moments of tension, moments where you feel exposed or challenged, where the connection no longer feels simple. These moments are often misunderstood as signs of incompatibility, when in reality they are indications of depth. The relationship is not only reflecting what is harmonious, but also what requires attention and integration. In this mirroring, you begin to see that the other person is not the source of these reactions, but the one who reveals them. What is triggered already exists within you, waiting to be acknowledged. The same is true in reverse, as you become a mirror for the other person's light and shadow as well. This mutual reflection creates a dynamic that is both intense and transformative. It requires awareness, because without it, the shadow can be projected outward, creating misunderstanding and conflict. But when approached with clarity, it becomes an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. The relationship then moves beyond the idea of perfection, beyond the need to appear whole or without flaw. It becomes a space where truth is allowed to surface, where both light and shadow are recognized as essential parts of the same inner reality. And in that recognition, something more authentic begins to take form, something that is not based on illusion, but on the willingness to see and be seen without distortion. There is a natural inclination to associate growth with ease, to believe that progress should feel smooth, reassuring, and free from disturbance. Yet the deeper movements of transformation rarely follow that path. What truly changes you often arrives through tension, through moments that disrupt your sense of stability and challenge the patterns you have come to rely on. Comfort has its place, but it tends to preserve what already exists. It maintains familiarity, reinforces habits, and allows you to remain within the boundaries of what is known. While this can create a sense of safety, it rarely invites expansion. Without disruption, there is little reason to question, to adapt, or to evolve beyond your current state. Tension, on the other hand, introduces a kind of pressure that cannot be ignored. It creates a friction between what you are and what you are becoming. This friction is not meant to break you, but to reveal where change is necessary. It exposes limitations, highlights contradictions, and brings awareness to areas that would otherwise remain hidden beneath the surface. In the context of a meaningful connection, this tension often appears in the form of misunderstandings, emotional intensity, or moments where expectations are challenged. These experiences can feel uncomfortable, even destabilizing, because they push you beyond the roles and responses you are accustomed to. They demand a different level of presence, one that is conscious rather than automatic. There may be an impulse to withdraw from this discomfort, to interpret it as a sign that something is wrong or misaligned. Yet when the tension is rooted in something real, it carries a different quality. It persists not as chaos, but as a steady pressure that continues to draw your attention inward. This inward movement is where growth begins to take shape. You start to examine your reactions, to question your assumptions, to recognize patterns that no longer serve you. The tension becomes a guide, directing you toward areas that require understanding rather than avoidance. It is in these moments that you are given a choice, to resist and return to what is familiar, or to remain present and allow the discomfort to reveal its meaning. Growth does not occur in the absence of challenge. It emerges through the willingness to engage with it. As this process unfolds, the tension begins to lose its threatening quality. It becomes something you can observe, something you can work with, rather than something you must escape. It transforms from a source of discomfort into a catalyst for awareness. And through this awareness, you begin to change, not because you were forced to, but because you recognize that remaining the same was no longer possible. At the beginning of many connections, there is a spark that feels immediate and consuming, driven by desire, curiosity, and the allure of something new. This stage carries intensity, but it is often unstable, shifting with mood, attention, and circumstance. What feels powerful in the moment can just as easily fade when the initial excitement begins to lose its novelty. Yet there are connections that do not dissolve when this surface layer passes. Instead of weakening, they begin to reveal a different quality, one that is quieter but far more grounded. What once felt like a fleeting attraction starts to settle into something that holds its presence over time, something that does not depend on constant stimulation to remain alive. This shift is not always obvious at first. It happens gradually, through consistency, through shared understanding, through the recognition that the connection continues to exist even in the absence of intensity. It is no longer defined by moments of excitement alone, but by a deeper sense of continuity that carries through silence, distance, and change. Fleeting desire often seeks immediate fulfillment. It is driven by impulse, by the need to experience something in the present without necessarily considering its depth or longevity. When that desire is satisfied or challenged, it tends to lose its momentum. What is enduring, however, is not tied to such conditions. It does not rely on constant validation or excitement to sustain itself. As something more lasting begins to form, the focus shifts from what is felt in isolated moments to what is built over time. There is a growing awareness that the connection is not easily replaced, not because of dependency, but because of the depth it has developed. It becomes something that integrates into your life rather than existing as a temporary experience. This kind of bond requires a different level of presence. It asks for patience, for understanding, for the willingness to remain engaged even when things are not driven by intensity. It reveals itself in the small, consistent ways that cannot be easily imitated by surface attraction. There is also a sense of recognition that what is forming carries meaning beyond immediate satisfaction. It begins to influence how you see yourself, how you relate, how you understand connection as a whole. It becomes less about chasing a feeling and more about participating in something that evolves with time. In this unfolding, you start to see the difference between what is temporary and what has the capacity to last. The connection no longer feels like something that comes and goes, but like something that remains, even as circumstances shift. And in that presence, something enduring continues to take shape, quietly establishing itself beyond the reach of fleeting desire.